Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my channel for another Hot Toys 1/6 scale Star Wars figure and vehicle duo unboxing and review. This is gonna be a big one. Today we're taking a look at not only Commander Appo with his BARC speeder, but also the Heavy Weapons Clone Trooper, his BARC speeder with the Sidecar. Now I got mine from toyswonderland.com, link for that is in the description below. They have Pay in 4 and a loyalty program. While you're down there, why not hit that subscribe, bell notification icon, and join button, so you're notified as soon as a brand new Hot Toys review goes live on the channel. Okay, so right off the bat, holy shit, this box is huge. And don't forget, we've got two of these darn things to look at. With such a large canvas, you'd think they'd go a little bit harder with the box art itself. It's kinda sorta boring. Yes, we have Appo, yes, we have the speeder, the main attractions here. I would have liked to have seen something a little bit more eye-catching, like a smoke trail, blast effects, lens flares, something. We do have a metallic foil Star Wars logo and his name down below. Around the back, warnings and legal info, nothing special. Speaking of nothing special, the cardboard that they've used for such a large box, in my opinion, is just not fit for purpose. It's far too thin. You can see it's crumpled and wrinkled right out of the shipper, and you can feel how corrugated it is underneath the print on the surface. You see, this is more like it. The artwork on the inside is stunning. We've got the BARC speeder, we've got Appo, we've got the ARF Trooper with the AT-RT and a 332nd clone loving the cross-sell. They've got a background going on, they've got burning embers, they've got effects. I love this piece of artwork, and I would have loved it even more if it was on the outside of the box. Dude, this BARC speeder, and it's not even assembled yet, is absolutely enormous. We'll get there with the next clone trooper. I just want to focus on Commander Appo right now. First in-hand impressions? So far so good. Hot Toys, they're expert cloners at this point. Maybe even better than the Kaminoans. We do still have one more of these bad boys to unbox though. You see, I personally go in for named clones. Appo, Rex, Fives, Cody, Fox. Characters that actually have a personality. Versus random clones like the Heavy Weapons Clone Trooper. I'm still excited to see what he looks like in hand. I just have a feeling I'm going to prefer Appo at the end of this. We do have an image of him on his BARC speeder, this time with the Sidecar. We have a metallic foil Star Wars logo just like Appo's box, and down below, his name. His box unfortunately fared significantly worse than Appo's. We've got dents everywhere. Maybe DHL had a field day kicking this one around the warehouse. If only they'd used thicker cardboard, I reckon this would have been significantly sturdier, and this damage wouldn't have been a thing. This slipcover? Hot Toys. This needed to be on the front of the box. This is gorgeous. We've got the 332nd Trooper, we've got the Heavy Boy on his BARC speeder, Commander Appo on his, the ARF Trooper, the AT-RT, and a 332nd Trooper. Once again, I'm loving the cross-sell, and it works. Seeing this squad assembled? Oh, I don't mind if I do. It's just now dawning on me, what did I sign myself up for? This is going to be a monster video. As we all know, good soldiers follow orders, so let's soldier on. First in-hand impressions for the Heavy Weapons Clone Trooper. Who needs a name when you look as good as this guy does? What about the BARC speeder? Oh no, this thing is bloody massive. I have no idea where this is going to go in the display, and we've got two to accommodate. I can't wait to find out though, because I can already tell you this thing looks absolutely beautiful. It's huge, it's really nicely painted, and the sculpt work is sharp as a pin. We'll save that for later. What we are going to do now is get all of the accessories that come with both of these clones laid out in the light box and take a closer look at everything they come with. So not the speeders. We'll get to them and their accessories. Let's just look at the clone stuff first. Starting off with their display bases, it's the classic Hot Toys rectangular Star Wars style base. Got this Republic flooring up on top. This time it's a little bit more saturated. Can you see that? There's a little bit more warmth to the brown/grey than usual. They've also added some red shading along the edges. For Appo's, it says Commander Appo, whereas for the Heavy Weapons Clone Trooper, what do you know, it says Heavy Weapons Clone Trooper. Then up on top for both of them, an adjustable crotch grabber. And these crotch grabbers, they do go a little bit lower and they swoosh out a bit more just because of all the armor they're wearing. For Appo's weapons, you do get the DC-15 blaster carbine cast in gunmetal with silver dry brushing pretty much everywhere. The iron sights are made of this rubbery plastic, and you can bring this supposed to be stock down, but not back because it's not wide enough to actually go all the way back. Apparently it's supposed to be a stock and Hot Toys just done goofed with that, kind of annoying. You do also get two DC-17 blaster pistols painted in the exact same way. Gunmetal, silver dry brushing, the sculpts are sharp as hell. No, they didn't. They gave the heavy weapons clone trooper less weapons than Commander Appo. He comes with the DC-15C blaster carbine, still with the goofy stock, painted in the same way. You get one blaster pistol instead of two, and a bag. Is the bag perhaps the heavy weapon? I mean, he's got some canisters on the front if they're thermal detonators, maybe. Still a stretch. I would have preferred a rocket launcher, rotary cannon, at the very least the massive DC-15 blaster rifle, but no. A bag, two weapons, that's it. This is the heavy weapons clone trooper. Oh, Hot Toys, you're all wild and seriously. The bag is made of fabric, there's this foam brick on the inside, so it will keep its shape. There is some dry brushing on the edge. Can you dry brush fabric? I think that's what they've done. There's a little bit of dry brushing to make it look slightly dirtier. And of course, we'll pop this on him a little bit later. Little did I know that not giving the heavy weapons clone trooper any actual heavy weapons, that's not the biggest crime here. It's the hand selection. They've taken away more hands, goddammit. We don't get closed fists, we don't get the pointing gestures anymore, and we only get one open palm hand. We can't even get pairs. We get trigger finger hands, gripping hands for the BARC speeder handlebars, one open palm hand, that's a crime, and one splayed out finger hand, not even two of those. We know that they've more than paid for the molds for these hands. They can totally give us the full set with all clones, and I hope they do going forward. This trend of giving us less and less hands with clone troopers, I don't like it at all. What we're going to do now, though, is move on to the BARC Speeder's accessories. Appo's Speeder with Sidecar. Now, the display bases themselves are identical for both of them. It's just that the connection point for the flight pole is in a different location. For the Sidecar, it's kind of middle back, whereas this one is right or left depending on orientation. We've seen this base before. This is the Mark 85 battle damage display base. It's rather thin and low profile. I like that. The BARC Speeder is big enough. We don't need the display base taking up a ton of room. Still planted and hefty enough to keep it solid, so I don't think it's going to wobble around in the display. The paint applications are great. This rock is nice and chonky with this edge detail. Got some grey dry brushing on the surface, speckling as well, so it looks nice and sandy and dusty. Then for the flight pole, it does connect with this hexagon, so when you plug it into the BARC Speeder, it is very secure. Then the pole itself is super chonky. I don't think the BARC Speeder is going to sag or droop over time. This dicky little thing is actually meant for the Sidecar if you have it flipped around in the inverse or reverse orientation. So if you want the Speeder going one way but the Sidecar going the other way, this is the stand you use for that. I won't ever be doing that. It's just an option if you want it. It's a clear flight pole and a clear stand down the bottom. It's round, basic, simple enough. For the sake of consistency, they have used the same display base for both of them. They've just moved the flight pole back here, I think to get the center of gravity just right. They've also changed up the attachment method to get the BARC Speeder onto the display base. Rather than just the single flight pole, which is the same as that one, I don't think that was going to cut it, so they went with this massive bracket. With the Sidecar, it's wider, it's heavier, so I don't think it was going to balance on just a single flight pole. You can try. I wouldn't advise it. I would go with this bracket. It's going to be a lot more sturdy that way. There are two connection points. This one is a hexagon, whereas this is a round peg, meant for the Speeder, meant for the Sidecar. It's ugly. You can't deny it's going to be significantly better than just the single flight pole. I am curious to see what that looks like with the BARC Speeder on it, if it is truly as ugly as it looks right now. Okay, enough accessories, enough display bases, let's look at some clones. So yeah, let's look at the clone troopers first, and then we'll move on to the BARC Speeders. Standing straight up and down in the light box, no crazy poses or accessories or anything like that. Except for their pistols in their holsters, I did want to complete the look. These two, they're significantly different from one another, which is a good thing considering you have to buy two BARC speeders just to get both clone troopers. If they were too similar, that would be an immediate deal breaker. They're not. I do have my preference, my favourite, we'll get to that later. Right now, they both look really good. They fill out the armour, the proportions are realistic, they look like real people in suits, shrunk down to 1/6 scale. That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. At this point, Hot Toys have made a lot of clones, and with each subsequent release, I just think they're getting better and better. They're making changes, they're using different styles of materials, they're using different styles of joints, until finally, I think we've arrived at the perfect 1/6 scale clone. I really don't think it gets much better than this. So going forward, this base body, this set of armor, just change out panels, add bits and pieces for each individual clone. Because not all clones are the same. They have different suits of armor, they have different helmets, they have different straps and buckles and harnesses and karmas and holsters. They've got a pretty good catalogue of parts at their disposal now. So chances are, if there's a clone that you want to see made, and Hot Toys have made a clone previously that uses that exact set of armor parts and pieces, or they can put it together with the catalog they have, the inventory available, yeah, I don't see why we couldn't see a bunch more clone troopers, with a lot of variation. Kicking things off with Commander Appo's helmet. I wanted to start off here because Commander Appo's in charge, after all. Believe it or not, his bucket is pretty much the exact same mold as the regular 501st Trooper, all the way down to the pop-out ears. So, if you wanted to pop some macro binoculars on Appo, you had some lying around from another clone trooper, don't see why you couldn't, and that would help differentiate him just a little bit more. The overall shape and size, identical. The blue markings are even the same, down to the scratch on the chin in the same spot, up here on the forehead also in the same spot. They've just dialed down the surface detail, whereas the regular 501st helmet had seen a lot of battle and there were scratches everywhere. Appo is a little bit cleaner, just with some heavier set scratches like this one right here. The lines down the side, present. The mouth is nice and thin along the edge. And because the visor is a separate piece of sculpted plastic inset into the helmet, there's an actual gap around the edge, so it casts a natural shadow in there. There's depth, is what I'm trying to say. Overall, I never really had a massive issue with this helmet mold, so I like it here as well. Around the back, most of this armor plating is also borrowed from the 501st Trooper. The sculpt work is sharp, you've got washers in all of the sculpted line work, and you've got some pitting and scratches on the surface. Plus a wash, just to dull down the white a little bit. This guy, he is no shiny. You can also make out the ribbed fabric bodysuit poking out from underneath the helmet. If you're wondering if he has a skin tone neck, if you have a Tamura Morrison head sculpt to pop on here, he doesn't. It's just a black neck like some of the earlier Hot Toys clones. So if you did pop an unhelmeted head sculpt on here, he might not look quite as realistic as some of the newer ones do. Base body underneath the armor and the ribbed fabric bodysuit is the same one that we've been seeing with all of the Hot Toys clone releases, after they made the changes to some of the joints for better articulation. So the proportions are good, he fills out the outfit just fine. The chest plate is reuse, the ab armor also reuse, I like the way it's painted, scratching on the blue eye on the front, he's a 501st clone. Then for the shoulder pads, they have used these elastic straps, and they're not attached to the upper torso armor, so they will move independently, great for posing. This piece of bicep armor is different, it's an asymmetrical design. The elbow pad is still made of the same material as the first time round, with rubbery plastic on the front, whereas the back is hard plastic. Washes, scratches, dirt and grime, weathering, I don't want to keep repeating myself. Then for the gauntlets, also asymmetrical. Got this blue stripe down the bottom, whereas on this side you got the comms panel. For this bicep guard, there are some ammo pouches. This is fully sculpted, so this piece is new. So too is the pauldron. I don't think we've ever seen this pauldron before. Slightly more squat, and it's very geometric. My favorite detail is, of course, this strap coming down the front, with the free-floating ammo pouches. The strap is actual fabric, by the way, so you can move it around if you choose. The blue, quite striking. It is different to the blue on the armor, which seems like a weird choice. Maybe this blue is just to signify his rank? If you know why this blue is different, if it's supposed to be, let me know down below. It's also made of this rubbery plastic with this leather grain texture on the surface, so it's not pleather, it's not going to peel and flake on you. Then they've glued it down to the upper torso. It's not free floating. Thank goodness, the free floating pauldrons when it comes to posing, they're a nightmare to work with. Speaking of free floating, the belt is, you can move it up and down. These little straps and buckles on the front, the buckles themselves are real metal, and I really like that little detail. They do attach to this kama, and it's not rubbery fabric or pleather. This is real fabric, and there are some tatters at the bottom. This guy has seen some shit. You also have dirt and grime everywhere, you've got these brown stains on the surface, and there's blue along the edge. This time, they have fixed the holsters. Now the DC-17 pistols, they are in there very securely. With previous figures like Captain Rex, for example, the pistols, they fell out constantly. With this guy, seeing as though you're probably going to have him on the BARC speeder, maybe at an angle, I guess they wanted to tighten these up, and I am glad they did. The undersuit does poke out just above his thigh armor and also behind his knees. As long as you're careful and you don't trap it in any of the joints here and there, because it is that stretchy, spandexy fabric, you can leave him in a dynamic pose. You can have him on the BARC speeder long term. Now, the molds for this armor we've seen before, but this paint application process, this guy might just be the dirtiest clone in my collection. The thigh armor is pretty clean, and as we work our way down, it gets absolutely disgusting. The lower we go, the dirtier this guy is. He's been zooming around on the BARC speeder, he's been kicking up crap, it's been sticking to the kama, and sticking to the armor. This guy's filthy. They've also used multiple shades of brown. It's not just one color, so they've speckled it on. It looks very natural. Except for one little area. On the underside of the feet, what happened to the weathering? This is so dirty, whereas this is completely clean. To me, that's a bit of a head scratcher. On to the heavy weapons clone trooper. I like Appo. I love the heavy weapons trooper. I know at the start of the video I said, oh, well, I only go for named clones, being all snooty, and I apologize for that. This guy is the standout. I love the blue, it's very striking, and this helmet design going for the Captain Vaughn / Commander Cody helmet, just without the little bits and pieces, it looks sick. The visor, the added details down below, this helmet is beautiful all the way around. I love the sculpt work and I dig the paint applications. They've also still gone with that separate glossy black plastic visor, so all of this depth, that's real. They've not just painted the glossy black on the surface. On the underside, because he doesn't have this massive pauldron, you can see his neck a little bit better, which I think helps with his proportions. This guy, he might just be dirtier than Appo. You've got way more schmutz back here, and you still have all of the washers in the sculpted vents and line work. He does have his bag on, so this strap adds some more visual interest. And because that pauldron is now different, you've got this shoulder pad on one side and the strap comes down to this belt pocket. Yeah, something about this design, it just works for me. Although they have reused this pocket with the opening at the top on this side as well. That's a weird choice. It's almost as though he was meant to have two straps, and in the end they were like, ooh, no, that's not accurate. He's only supposed to have one. Should we change this belt box back to the normal one? Nah, just leave it as is. Nobody's gonna notice. I noticed. Small details, small things, doesn't really matter in the grand scheme. Around the front, this panel, this pad, if you will, I thought was real leather because they've been doing that recently. It's not, I looked it up. This is leather-like material, so it's pleather. It does feel nice and soft, however. This isn't. This is rubbery plastic, and it's a lot more stiff as compared to this. It should still get out of your way for posing. Now, it is adhered at the top, so it doesn't move as much as I would like personally. The bag is literally just on there. You can take it off if you so choose. Like I said, it adds something. More asymmetry is always a good thing. Having this really vibrant blue up the top, then having white for the straps, then blue for the shoulder pads, blue for the little elbow cover pieces, the straps around the front, Something about this man, I don't know. I just really, really like how this clone trooper looks in person. I don't want to keep repeating myself. You know I like it. I've said I like it, I love it. I keep saying the same thing over and over again. I'm just enamored with this figure. The strap, because it does come over the top and connect to this piece and that's locked down, it does tend to pull the belt up a little bit, so you might find that you're adjusting it when it comes to posing. He does have the fixed holster. It's so fixed, in fact, you can hold the entire figure from it. Please, don't recommend doing that. Be careful with yours. Then down here on the legs, he's got a lot more blue. The color blocking, it just ticks that box for me. Super visually striking. You still have the same ribbed fabric bodysuit, still have some dirt and grime, some scratching on the high points where the blue paint has been scuffed away during battle, and you've got some deeper, heavier set scratches. Maybe that's carbon scoring, who knows? He doesn't have as much dirt and grime down below as Appo, so that guy still takes the cake for the filthiest clone trooper of the bunch. On the underside, look at that, he's actually got some more withering down here compared to Appo. Chances are, unless you're crazy like me, I don't think you're going to be getting both BARC speeders just so that you can get both clone troopers. If you are, well, this is what they look like. For a quick side-by-side comparison, Appo on the left, Heavy Weapons Clone Trooper on the right. They share a lot of the same armor pieces, they're on the same base body, they have the same undersuit, they have the same proportions, they're the same height. But they are not the same clone troopers. I prefer the Heavy Weapons boy. I like his shoulder pads set up with the strap going into the belt, I prefer his markings, and I dig the Commander Cody style helmet. Appo is still cool, but if I really had to pick right now between these two, I would be leaning towards the Heavy Weapons Clone Trooper. Yes, he doesn't come with any heavy weapons, but his BARC speeder has a sidecar, which I appreciate. It's been a while. So much so that I had forgotten how much I really don't like the joint setup on the original Hot Toys clone, the 501st Trooper. He is still the same height as these two, he still has the same build, it's just that the joints are a little bit different. The blue is also slightly brighter. It's not enough to upset the equilibrium of all the blues in the display. It is something that might catch your eye, lighting depending. Ooh, some ARC Trooper action. Seeing these three standing together, they just work. Having these specialized clones with the pauldrons and the straps and the ammo pouches and the buckles and the holsters and the karmas. Something about having very different looking clones, which I know defeats the purpose of them being clones, it does work for me. Rex does look a little bit shorter than these two. Don't let this shot fool you, it's just because he's not wearing his helmet. If he had his bucket on, he would be the same height as these two clones. He's still on the exact same base body. Now Rex, he's an outlier. His armor is painted significantly differently than any of the other 501st clones. He's got that green tint to it, he's got the welding marks, he's got more scratches, and the blue is much more worn. He still works with these two though. Okay, I think it's time to look at some BARC speeders. This is a moment I've not necessarily been looking forward to, trying to wrangle this huge monster on camera. Yeah, it's going to be a bit of a challenge, but I reckon I'm up for it. It's very long, it's quite wide around the back, and when you put it on the display base, it sits up pretty high too. So do your measurements, check your cabinets, make sure you have room for these things, especially if you're getting both of them. Now there is some assembly required, it's pretty simple. You have to install these blasters. Around the back they're labelled left and right, and the pegs are a little bit thinner than the ones around the front. They look the same, the mold is very similar, it's just the pegs, the peg ports are a little bit bigger around the front, so make sure you're putting the right blasters in the right places. The sculpt and paint applications for the blasters themselves, great, they look very interesting. You also know you have them facing the right way when you have these super thin barrels pointing forward. There is some light greyish dry brushing over the top of the bluish grey undercoat. I like the way they look. Ooh, I did notice one big difference between the cannons. You do have this ribbed detail on the front of these barrels, where around the back, these barrels are smooth. So if you want to find a much more easily spottable difference when you're trying to install the cannons, look at the barrels. The ribbed ones, they go at the front. You do have this air intake section. There's some scuffing and chipping on the blue paintwork. Got some little greebly details, panel lines everywhere, and the paint applications, they are just gorgeous. There's so much wind burn here, it looks as though this is not a brand new speeder. It's been zooming around on Felucia or Seleucami or wherever the hell else they use these things, and it's pretty filthy. There's speckling of dirt and grime, there's that windburn effect, these trails, that happens at speed when sand is being picked up and sort of pulled across the surface and the paint is scuffed away. That's what I mean by windburn. The blue is very vivid, but not overly done. It's not too saturated, it matches the clones themselves. Then these panels around the front, they can move. I'm not sure if that's to facilitate some kind of air braking or banking or turning. Either way, you can move these, so they're a little bit adjustable for posing. When you have the clones on there, what I mean by posing is you tilt this thing, you can have one of these flared out and the other one going in. There's also some sculpted and painted detail on the inside of these panels. Can we call this a cockpit, seeing as though it's an open-air vehicle? I'm going to roll with it. The cockpit is well done. We've got this control panel, some gunmetal rectangles, some smaller squares, and some line work sculpted in. Then for the seat, this is not rubbery plastic. Normally I'd prefer that, seeing as though rubbery plastic on hard plastic is just more grippy because of friction, so it'd keep the clones in place. This is textured, so I think it'll have the same effect. We'll find out when we put the clones on here. They've also added some lighter brown dry brushing just around the edges to dirty it up a little. The handlebars can move forward and back. Both the outside and inside set, they move very smoothly. I am worried about the little brake things though. Just be careful when you're popping your clones on there, try not to snag these on the armor. Down below, the pedals can move forward and back. These pistons are made of metal. They also move nice and smoothly, and the pistons actually actuate. Plus, the armature they're on can be pulled out. If you find you need a little bit more room for your clones, just pull them out. Then their legs can sit slightly further down. Same thing with the pedals, just move them down as far as you like. It does make sense that the underside of the speeder is pretty heavily soiled. It's been flying along, kicking up dust, kicking up rocks, that's then been hitting the bottom and scratching the finish. There are heavier scratches. There's pitting, there's this stippling of dirt and grime, and you have washers in the line work to highlight all of the detail. Plus some chipping along the edge of the blue that extends around from the front of the speeder. My favorite detail though is the soot effect in the exhaust. Is that the exhaust, by the way? It's facing the wrong way. Usually it goes the other way. If that's the exhaust, it looks really good. They've feathered it out so it nicely blends into the white. They've also used it to hide one of the peg ports for the sidecar. The other ones are a little bit more visible. This one is for the flight pole, so we can forgive that. You'll never see it when it's on the stand, which you need to use because there's no landing gear to have this actually on the ground. This peg port also for the sidecar, and one more just around the back. That one is a massive one. And unfortunately, if you have the BARC speeder that comes with Appo and no sidecar, you're stuck with this visible peg port. It is on the bottom. Granted, if you have it banking, you are going to start to see it very quickly, depending on the angle. Not a deal breaker for me, just something to be aware of. If it is for you, then yeah, totally, I understand. You've got more dirt everywhere than around the back, this grille detail, and it does thin out quite significantly back here. But not before it flares out at the sides. Something about the shape of this thing, it looks very Formula 1 car-like, and maybe that's what they were going for. I am curious to see what it looks like with the sidecar on though. Somehow it just got bigger. Now the speeder itself is identical. This is now the one that comes with the heavy weapon clone trooper. The paint applications are the same, the sculpt is the same, the assembly process is the exact same, you have to install the blasters. Everything that moves is the same, so we don't have to address the speeder anymore, we've done that. It's pretty lightweight actually. I thought this thing was going to be heavier. It's good that it's light. That just means when it's floating in midair on the flight pole, it's not going to weigh itself down and droop over time. Now it does peg in the sidecar down the bottom, around the back, on the side, and in this soot effect area. I would have liked to have seen some soot on this panel. It doesn't make a ton of sense that it's so clean. Now to install it, it's a little bit of a challenge. I would suggest pulling out the pedal armatures first. Then you have to slot this armature underneath, avoiding this metal rod, and peg it in position. After you do that, you can plug in this one, plug in the back one, and connect the sidecar itself. Speaking of the sidecar, it is predominantly blue versus the predominant white color scheme on the speeder. A little bit of contrast is never a bad thing. If Got these racing go faster stripes on the front for some reason. There's chipping, and my favorite little detail is this streak on the white circle, as though the paint was a little bit fresh when this was driven out on the battlefield, and the paint, it smeared as they were driving around. There are some moving parts and pieces. The blast shield can go up and down. You can rotate this sick-looking twin-barreled blaster left and right. And you can also you can hinge the handles on 2 different joints. Then down below, you can move the pedals. And the sidecar itself does have a party piece, although I don't know how many people are actually going to do this. If you pull it off the armature, you can rotate it all the way around the back, and this is what that extra stand is for. This is the reverse configuration. You can plug in that separate flight pole, and then it makes this thing even longer. I have no idea who is going to display this like this. If you are, all the power to you. You can also actuate it on the joint around the back. This one where it's connected to the speeder. I don't recommend that. I wouldn't want to wear out the rubber gasket in that joint because then it will become loose and a little bit unmanageable keeping the sidecar in this configuration. It might slide around on you. Also, the peg that this slots into is very secure. It's actually got a little clip, so when you push it in, it locks in place. The seat is made of that same textured material as the seat on the BARC speeder, but more weathered. Okay, maybe that's because this is offset. There's more dirt and grime on it. You have some greebly details on the inside that you can't really see because it's tucked behind this blaster. And you have all of this kind of pipe work working its way up and into the back of the sidecar. A couple things that I almost missed. This panel can move forward and back to facilitate actually putting the clone trooper in because his legs are longer than this. And there are multiple points of articulation on the handles. You can rotate these forward and back, and then you can move the brake pieces independently. Secure, but at what cost? This bracket is absolutely hideous. It's very big. You can see the waffling, which is a trick that companies use to save money when they don't want to cast this out of solid plastic. Don't love that. Around the top, you can see the waffling too. From the front, you can see it. From the back, you can see it. This bracket is just nasty. Maybe you can chance it by not using that bracket and just plugging the flight pole into the speeder. I wouldn't risk it, just because the center of gravity is now in the middle, versus if it was just the speeder, it would be in the middle of the speeder itself. I'm not going to be displaying the sidecar. It takes up way too much width, and the drawbacks of having this bracket be visible, don't really like that. Not to mention, you do have to now sacrifice a clone to put in the sidecar. You can't just have it empty. That wouldn't make any sense at all. To me, it might to you. I get it. I just don't have room for this thing. And they didn't include a second clone. If they're doing a sidecar Hot Toys in the future, if you're doing vehicles with sidecars and additional seats, you kind of sort of have to include a secondary character to put in that seat. You can't bank on someone having infinite clones to spare to put on the BARC speeder. I would have loved to have seen a second heavy weapons clone trooper, or better yet, something completely different to pop on here. Now that I'm seeing this, I'm starting to rethink my position, saying that you don't need the sidecar. Then again, now that I have the 501st Trooper on here, having a vehicle that seats 2 clones, this is straight up centerpiece material. If you have a Clone Wars shelf, this thing is going to be an immediate attention grabber. It's massive, 2 clones, both different from one another. Oh, I love the way this looks, and I really didn't think I was going to like the sidecar. Don't worry, we will get much better angles of what these two look like on the BARC speeder a little bit later. Commander Appo still hits pretty hard. His BARC speeder being as sleek as it is without that cumbersome sidecar, it just looks like this guy's a total badass. He's riding along, he's got his Karma flapping in the wind, he's got some pistols on his side. And when you start to play around with the angles of this thing and you get to posing him on the speeder and adjusting the handles here and there, you can make this look dynamic and still just as visually striking as the BARC speeder with the sidecar, at least in my opinion. I still like the presence of that one. This one is no slouch. Oh, getting him on here? That was non-trivial. The seat being made out of rubbery plastic would have helped be nice and grippy to keep him in place. I thought that the textured material would be fine. It isn't. There is nowhere near enough friction. He just slides around all over the place. You do want to have him straddling the bike to try and keep him in place. Then most of the heavy lifting is being done by the hands and the handlebars. These are very thin pieces of plastic, just don't put too much pressure on them. The feet don't really want to sit on the pedals, at least not well. As soon as you adjust the pedals, they spring back up. You'll have to do some tweaking, or at least I will, to get this to look right. And to have him sitting all the way back is a little bit of a challenge given the ratchet joints in the hips. You want to have him sitting back, leaning slightly forward, tilting the head forward, and have his arms sticking out, kind of like those retro fat boy style motorcycles. Oh, but it's worth the hassle. Having him leaning back with his arms stretched out, this dude looks like an absolute boss. I know it's just a static shot, and I'm sorry for that. I wanted to have the camera moving around too. It's just that because of the size of this thing and because it's white on a white background, I didn't want to blow out any of the detail. Everything is currently correctly exposed, and Appo on his BARC speeder floating on the dynamic flight pole looks pretty darn cool. I didn't think I was going to like this as much as I now do. Okay, front on, staring down the barrel of the speeder, then looking back at Commander Appo. I wish I had the depth in the cabinet to display it like this. This is one mean looking display option. Yeah, the sidecar just adds something. The BARC speeder with Appo, that is sick. This is something else. Having two clones on the same vehicle, I can't get over how much I like this. Like I said with Appo and his BARC speeder. I didn't think I was going to like this as much as I now do. I don't like repeating myself. Sometimes I have to just to get that point across. Even the stupid clear plastic waffled bracket, you can't really see it from the front. You can see it, obviously it's right there. It's just that your eyes don't really go to it. It's not what you focus on. It's the overall presence of these things. Again, two clones on the same vehicle. Someone needs to do a welfare check on that flight pole. I'm worried that over time, it is going to start to droop down just under the weight of the BARC speeder with the sidecar. It's not overly heavy. It is heavy enough that the flight pole, being as small as it is, might struggle with it. I'll just have to keep an eye on it in the display, and you'll have to do the same. From this angle, this looks even more impressive. Staring kinda down the barrel of both the BARC speeder and the front of the sidecar. If I was to ever display these two like this on this setup, this is the angle I'd probably go for. Just because with a full side profile, if you have the BARC speeder facing forward, you wouldn't really be able to see the heavy weapons clone trooper. And if you have the BARC speeder facing outwards, then you wouldn't really be able to see the sidecar. So this angle, I think, is the right amount of both options. Going over articulation, while the clones are pretty much the same, I do still plan to go over articulation on them both anyway. Starting off with Commander Appo's helmet, it's on an articulated neck with a ball joint down the bottom, and up underneath the bucket, a double ball peg. Combined looking forward to there, going back to there, decent enough for a BARC speeder riding pose. You also get swivel and pivot side to side. Seeing as though the design is asymmetrical, this pauldron will limit articulation on this arm, whereas the other will move more freely. Going up to there, going forward further than I expected before it collides with this rubbery plastic pauldron. Then you get a butterfly joint at the shoulder that hinges up and down. Swivel at the bicep, ratcheted double bend at the elbow. Just be careful, this strap on the elbow armor is a little bit fragile and it does get marred up very quickly. I would suggest tuck it up underneath the bicep armor, then you can bend that elbow past 90. The wrist peg, it's a hinge and swivel. The torso is multiple pieces of armor overlapping. It's going to be more restricted, crunching forward to there, going back to there, it does get a little bit gappy. Swivel and pivot side to side. The legs will go forward to there on ratchets. If you want them to go further, just rotate the thigh armor, then they will go even higher. Going out to there. Swivel at the upper thigh, ratcheted double bend at the knee. Same thing as with the elbow pad, just be careful of this strap. Tuck it up underneath the armor, then the knee will go slightly further. And lastly, the ankles, double ball pegs, good for forward and back, swivel, as well as ankle tilt. So with Appo as the baseline, we could be a little bit quicker with the heavy weapons clone trooper. His helmet, the exact same setup, a ball joint underneath the neck and up underneath the helmet, a double ball peg. Combined, looking further forward than Appo, looking back to there, swivel and pivot side to side. His shoulder pad is on the opposing side to Appo, so let's look at this arm. Going forward to there before it starts to collide, going out to there. You also get a butterfly joint at the shoulder that goes up and down. Swivel at the bicep, ratcheted double bend at the elbow, same thing, please be careful of that strap, it does get damaged easily. It will go past 90. Then for the wrist peg, a hinge and swivel. The torso will crunch forward and back before it starts to get gappy, swivel and pivot. The legs, going forward to there, don't forget our trick, rotate the thigh armor, then it will go even further. It will go out to there, swivel at the upper thigh, ratcheted double bend at the knee, and there is a cutout back here, so you can very easily tuck this strap up underneath the armor, going past 90. The ankles, double ball peg, forward and back, swivel, ankle tilt. Moving on to the 3 cool and 3 annoying things. The first annoying thing is, you call this guy the Heavy Weapons Clone Trooper, but he doesn't come with any heavy weapons. He comes with the DC-15 blaster carbine and the DC-17 blaster pistol. Okay, he has a bag with some thermal detonators on the front. That's not enough for me. He really should have come with, at the very least, a rotary cannon. The second annoying thing is every time we get a clone trooper, they just keep taking hands away for some reason. This time, we don't even get 2 open palm hands. They've taken away the closed fists, and now we don't have the pointing gesture hands either. It's just trigger finger hands, gripping hands, 1 splayed out finger hand, and 1 open palm hand. The same thing can be said for the Heavy Weapons Clone Trooper. You might be thinking, Justin, it's not a massive deal, just swap the hands with some of the clones already in your collection. You can do that for Appo, for the Heavy Weapons Trooper. He's got some very specific markings on the back of his hands, so you can't do that for him. The third annoying thing is, it's cool in theory that Appo's BARC speeder is compatible with the Sidecar, but where are you going to get the Sidecar from? Hot Toys do not sell the parts and pieces from this set individually. As much as I would like them to, because sometimes you just want the Clone Trooper, and you do not have space for the BARC speeder. Nevertheless, the third annoying thing is this port down the bottom, specifically on Appo's BARC speeder. It's completely unusable. If you don't have the Sidecar, the ports, they're rendered useless. And like I said, there's no way of just buying the Sidecar and adding it on. The first cool thing is the fact that we're even getting a BARC speeder in the first place. It wasn't that long ago that Hot Toys hadn't even made their first clone trooper. And look at them now, they're pumping out monsters like this. This thing is centerpiece material all day long. The second cool thing is they also include normal display bases. They know that most people don't have room to display 2 BARC speeders, so chances are you can have one of these clones on their speeder, and the other one just standing on their normal display base. Third cool thing is finally, they've fixed the holsters. They are so sturdy, I can actually hold the entire figure just off the blaster pistol. Wrapping up on Hot Toys Commander Appo with BARC Speeder, and the Heavy Weapons Clone Trooper with his BARC Speeder plus the Sidecar. Let's not talk about the BARC Speeders right now, let's focus on the clones first. Are these vehicle sets worth picking up just for the clones? I don't really think so. I love clones. Don't get me wrong, the more the merrier in my display, and the more variation the better. These two are unique. But they're not unique enough. The 501st helmet for Appo is a little bit boring. We've seen pauldrons before, we've seen Karmas before, and we've seen holsters before. He's not a prominent enough clone for me at least to give him a proper center spot in the display. Then for the Heavy Weapons Clone Trooper, he's a little bit more visually interesting. He's got the Vaughn/Commander Cody helmet. He's got the bag on. I like his shoulder strap harness pad thing. It's quite striking. Still, he is just a 501st Clone Trooper with a couple of different markings, a different helmet, and a bag on, with the shoulder strap thing. I reckon if you don't have room for these two and their subsequent BARC speeders, which we're getting to, you maybe don't need them. They're cool to have, it's just that main characters like Rex, Cody, Bly even, who have a proper feature in the Star Wars films and the Clone Wars rather than just Heavy Weapons Clone Trooper, generic as it gets, I would rather give that display real estate to proper named clones rather than just blink and you'll miss it appearance clones like these two. Okay, the BARC speeders. They are huge, they are quite cumbersome, but they have presence. They immediately upgrade these two clones. They go from, maybe you don't really need them because they're kinda just more of the same thing with a couple of tweaks and adjustments, to, oh, if you can fit this, you need this. It is a massive centerpiece. It's impressive. It's striking. It's fun to look at. It's interesting. And that's what it's all about. When you walk into your collection room, you need something to catch your eye, to keep that excitement going, to keep your love for collecting high. And this is a piece that'll do that for you. And if you get two of them, even more so. With the Sidecar popping a clone in there, it'll reinvigorate potentially your love for a different clone. You can pop Vaughn in there, you can pop Rex in the Sidecar. Who knows? You can have fun with it. These pieces I have had a blast with, and I cannot wait to figure out some way of actually using them in my collection. Now, I got mine from toyswonderland.com. Link for that is in the description below. They have Pay in 4 and a loyalty program. While you're down there, why not hit that subscribe, bell notification icon, and join button if you like the sound of seeing your name in the end credits of my reviews. Like, comment, and subscribe. We'll catch you in the next video.